Hello and welcome to the Scottish Conservative Friends of BAME podcast. My name's Rami, I'm a member of the board and I'll be hosting today's episode, which is featuring Stephen Kerr, who's the head of the candidates board of the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party. So thank you for joining me today, Stephen.
My pleasure to be with you.
Fantastic. So just to sort of knuckle down into it, for someone who may be looking at, becoming a candidate, the application process may seem a little bit daunting. So having both gone through the process yourself before becoming an MP in 2017, and now obviously in your role leading the candidates board, could you briefly sort of delve into each stage of the process and maybe provide some advice from your own experience?
Yeah, so the first thing is you have to search your own thoughts about and your own feelings about becoming a candidate, because it is a commitment. But most people that want to become members of Parliament, whether it's the Scottish Parliament or the Parliament at Westminster, they do have a deep yearning. I mean, for example, in my case, other little boys grew up planning to score the winning goal for Scotland at Wembley, or kicking the winning penalty at Twickenham. But I grew up wanting to speak for Scotland from the green benches. I mean, that's rather a sad reflection. I probably dropped on my head as a child or something. I don't know what. But I think you have to have that deep desire to start with. And then I think you have to get involved. You have to get involved in your local party, your local association. It becomes less daunting a prospect to stand in front of people that you know, in other words. When you can look out into an audience and see friendly faces, you find people who are actually willing you to succeed, to do the very best you can. That's helpful. But that's a relationship that's forged through, time spent together, working together, leafleting, canvassing, raising money, doing all the things we do as Conservatives. And of course, most importantly of all, eating and drinking together, which is probably an essential aspect of being a party activist, because it bonds us together. And then when you've got that involvement, when you've gotten to know the party and the people that are members of the party, then you apply to become a candidate and you go through an assessment, which is run by the party centrally under the auspices of the candidates board, and that is a series of tests, really, about your ability to prioritize, to manage your time, to speak, to write a letter, to write an article, basic stuff that I think most people will feel pretty confident to do. There's also some group exercises which are actually a lot of fun for the people participating, and also for the people that are assessing. I mean, it's a good day. It's not an ordeal at all. And at the end of that, you get told whether or not you get feedback. You get told whether or not you've passed the assessment, whether you're on the approved list. You'll also get feedback about areas where it's you could become stronger, areas for development. So I mean, the whole process, it really isn't daunting. I mean, at the end of the day, despite it being politics, we are among friends, and so I would encourage everyone to do it. It's great fun, actually.
And in terms of advice you have, like for each stage of the process, do you have any advice from your own experience of actually going through the process and now that you, of course, manage the board?
Yeah, I think my strong advice is to practice all the basic skills that go into becoming a successful member of Parliament or member of the Scottish Parliament, whatever it is, or councillor, or whatever it is you want to do. And those involve being able to express yourself, so find opportunities to express your point of view formally and informally. Put yourself out there into the less than comfortable zone of standing up in front of a crowd and speaking. I mean, seek opportunities to do that, to test yourself, learn how to debate, put forward ideas, and also learn how to listen. Very important quality we don't spend enough time talking about, ironically, in terms of what makes a good politician is someone who actually can listen, and can listen empathically to other people and try and understand their point of view. There's not enough of that in politics generally. So those are really good skills. Yes, there is actually a competency model, believe it or not, which I'm quite happy to share with people who want to know more about it. What are the skills that are required, and practice them? I mean, the idea that we spend our whole life practicing.
I think those are some really good, areas to work on, and areas of preparation as well. And let's say somebody is an approved candidate, so from the time of becoming an approved candidate all the way to perhaps standing for election or even being elected, are there any mentoring opportunities, training exercises, or ways that the party can sort of support candidates in developing their skills in key areas?
Well, the candidates board tries to have a strong relationship with all the different parts of the party, both geographically speaking, in terms of the regions of Scotland, but also the different interest groups or stakeholder groups within the party. So we regularly contact with them and are constantly offering to work with associations and groups to provide opportunities for people to come into contact with the candidates board and to learn what it means to become a candidate. I mean, there is mentoring available. There are training opportunities available. And the key thing in this whole process, by the way, is feedback. It is very, very important that people get feedback. I mean, we can provide opportunities and experiences for people as a party, but we need to tell people how they're doing. And there's two types of feedback, really. There's positive feedback. That's the feedback we all love. That's the type we've become used to from our grandparents. And then there's constructive feedback, which is the kind of feedback we get from the people that love us dearly but think we can do better. And we offer both sorts of feedback to people so that they can know where their areas of development are, as well as their areas of strength. Everyone likes to hear about how well they're doing, but giving people an idea about where they can develop, that's significant as well. And then offering to provide the support and help, that's important too. So yeah, there's mentoring. So when you become a candidate, when you're on the approved candidates list and you get selected, you do get a mentor. And it's usually someone that's been around for a while, that's probably been a campaigner themselves, been a candidate, or perhaps even been an elected member. And you can go to them and talk to them about the challenges that you're facing, and you strike up a relationship of trust with that individual, and they become a source of strength when you're feeling a little bit worn down by being on the front line. They're there to help you gather your thoughts and gather your strength and give you some inspiration. They're people that you can go to for good advice about the situations you find yourself in. So yeah, mentoring is very important. And also we try and develop a network between people that have become approved candidates as well, so that people get to know each other. You're not likely otherwise to know someone if you're in central Scotland that's in the north of the country that you can relate to. But the whole idea is that we try and build a network and people feed into the network and establish more relationships.
Yeah, that sounds like a very good sort of community that you're building between.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good way of putting it. A candidate community.
Exactly. We found that tagline for you there. And just to sort of bring it back to, going through the process, what are some of the more common reasons why people perhaps aren't successful in the process? Have you noticed from your time that there are sort of common areas that if people maybe worked on a little bit more in preparation that they perhaps would have maybe done better on?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has got to do with confidence. So much in life is a matter of confidence, a little bit of self-belief. We're our own worst critics, and with a lack of constructive as well as positive feedback, sometimes we can get a distorted view of ourselves, and that usually isn't usually that people think they're better than they are. It's usually think that maybe they're not as good as they could be. And frankly, sometimes people have a hard job believing how good they are, and just that little bit of confidence, that little bit extra self-belief to be able to put themselves forward. You don't have to be the greatest orator that the world has ever seen. You don't have to be the deepest philosopher. You don't have to be a policy wonk that has all the smallest minutiae details of policy. You just have to have a desire to want to serve, and a willingness to speak up, to ask questions, to make points, and to engage in an exchange of ideas with a view to pulling people together. I mean, the problem with politics generally, I think, in many places in the world, including our own dear land, is that the politics is now seen as a field of conflict. It doesn't have to be that way. We should come into politics because we want to work together with different ideas, but ultimately come together in our communities, in our country, in order to do good, to serve other people, to provide people with opportunities, to make things better, to give people a better life chances for our young people especially. I mean, that's what you need to have. So I'm kind of rambling in my answer to you a bit, but truthfully, I think the most important thing is a little bit of self-belief, a little bit of self-confidence, a belief that actually, no matter who you are, what your background is, what your qualifications are in the eyes of the world, you actually can make a contribution by turning up and speaking up and being there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about the fact that sometimes passion and enthusiasm and, you know, the right intention can maybe sort of trump, you know, being technically, you know, very good in sort of policy or other areas. It's all about, you know, your intention and your passion to serve your community. I think that's a very positive message.
I absolutely think that's right. I think that politics should return to being about public service, about giving of yourself in serving others. Unfortunately, the environment of politics at the minute can sometimes be a bit destructive. There are all kinds of reasons for that. That's a discussion for another day. But I would never want anyone who has a desire to serve their community, their country, to ever be put off by getting involved in politics. I can tell you that it is one of the most worthwhile things I have ever done in my life, was to be a candidate, to carry my party standard, to engage in the public debate in the public square, but also then to be elected and to have the privilege of serving the people of Stirling. In my case, it's one of the most worthwhile, most satisfying things I have ever done, because you can affect change in individual lives, in families, for neighbourhoods. You can really be an influence for good. You can use the privilege you have of a position of service to do good. It's fundamental to my values, I'm sure to the values of many other Scots from all sorts of backgrounds.
Yeah, and just sort of on the point of, you know, serving your community, you first have to be elected. So in terms of a successful campaign, what do you think maybe the three most important elements of a successful campaign are? And where do you think candidate selection fits within this?
I think, well, first of all, you don't need to be elected to serve your community. That's the first thing I want to say. You don't have to wait until you're elected to begin to serve. There are issues that people care about in the communities that we live in, that people who want to serve and want to get involved can throw themselves into. There are community councils that are crying out for good people who have a passion for the place that we live in, for the people that live in the place that we live in. And there are so many opportunities to serve. Now, you were asking specifically though about three. Tell me that bit again.
Yeah, so what do you think the three most important elements of a successful campaign are, and where do you think sort of candidate selection fits within these three?
Well, when I've been a candidate, my campaign team always joke with me that the candidate is simply a legal necessity. It's not the case, by the way. The candidate needs to lead from the front. So in terms of what are what makes a successful election campaign, I think if you are the candidate, you've got to lead from the front. You've got to turn up. You can never ask people to do things that you're not prepared to do them yourselves. I think you need to be prepared to put the work in. We joke about shoe leather, but it is about shoe leather. In normal times, it's about knocking on people's doors. It's about being available, accessible to people. It's about doing a lot of talking. It's also about doing a lot of listening, trying to understand where other people are coming from with their different points of view. But as far as a successful campaign goes, you've got the candidate doing all of that stuff, you know, an all-weather, all-seasons candidate, and then you need to build a team. And I'll tell you, it is fantastic fun to be in a campaign team. There are lots of laughs, even when I can think of instances where I think of one Saturday in the 2017 general election when Ruth Davidson came to Stirling, and we had a monsoon in Stirling. I think we almost renamed that weather Ruth Davidson weather, because when she came, I mean, we were absolutely soaked to the skin. It was unreal, the amount of rain that fell in such a compressed period of time. But you know what? We had a fantastic time being out that afternoon, knocking on people's doors. I mean, they were astonished to see us out in that weather, you know, and they were even more astonished when Ruth Davidson was standing on their doorstep, looking completely as if she had been, you know, dipped in the river before she stood in front of them. There are so many happy memories, so many happy times. It's a lot of fun. And I think an indispensable element to any general election, any election at any level, at any time, is that you're enjoying it and having fun, making memories. Because believe me, when you retire to the bar after the campaign's over, it's the war stories, if you like, the sharing of campaign stories. It's a bit like the fisherman's story about how big the fish is. Every time the story gets retold of some episode on a campaign, a little bit more gets added to it for a dramatic effect. But it's just fun, and politics can be fun, and campaigning absolutely must be fun.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are a lot of new candidates, you know, individuals who haven't perhaps stood in previous elections that are coming into this, you know, Scottish Parliament election where, you know, suddenly it seems to be all digital, and, you know, what they can do as a candidate is perhaps reduced. So how do you think the party and, you know, campaigns and associations can sort of work to, you know, provide that assurance and support candidates, you know, going through this digital period?
That's a really good question. I mean, we're all learning. We've all learned in the last year to do things much differently than we've been used to doing them. I'm not entirely sure I have all the answers to that question that you've just asked. I think we need to support each other. So if we're having Zoom meetings with members and supporters, I mean, we need to give the candidate the assurance of being there, being supportive. You know, we need to take an interest in the social media posts of our candidates. Facebook is a very powerful social media platform in that respect. I think reaches more people in a locality. Twitter tends to be a little bit scattergun, and of course Twitter is also famous for the marauding trolls who can sometimes be most unpleasant, frankly. But Facebook doesn't tend to attract that same sort of thing. You know, we're just going to have to all learn how to use cameras and microphones in a way that I never had to before I became an MP. I mean, most of my campaigning in the campaigns that I've been the candidate in and have supported since I joined this party, and that was a long time ago, by the way. That was like when I was a teenager. I'm not a teenager now, clearly. But you know, that was always about leafleting and canvassing and street stalls and all of that kind of analog campaigning that we were quite used to. But now it is about Facebook, it's about Zoom, it's about, you know, making a good video and trying to get it disseminated through page sharing in different pages. And yeah, you need a team of people to help you with that. Try and get your message across through their social media presence as well. But yeah, I don't have all the answers to that, and I hope, in all sincerity, we are talking now. The vaccination campaign is rolling out faster in some places than others, clearly, but hopefully by the time we get to the short campaign period for the Scottish parliamentary elections, for example, we're going to be able to do a more blended approach, digital, which I think will be with us forever now. I think some things have changed for good in the way that we work, and also the traditional analog, as I call it, style of interacting with people on their doorsteps.
Fantastic. And just finally, one of the key aims of the Scottish Conservative and SCBAME is to encourage people from different backgrounds to stand as candidates for the party. So what do you think, you know, the party can do to help the Scottish Conservative and SCBAME to achieve a more diverse political cohort, you know, in a similar way to the UK party and what we managed to achieve in that area?
Well, just look at the cabinet. Just look at the cabinet in terms of the ethnic diversity that's represented by those who hold key offices of state, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Home Secretary, the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, the President of COP26. I could go on. I've got a dear friend who's the Treasury Minister, Kemi Badenoch, who is an outstanding minister and an outstanding member of Parliament. And all of these individuals see themselves as British, but they also come from the rich diversity of a BAME background. So the Conservative Party has always been the natural home for the communities that we describe as BAME. The values of those communities are represented by the Conservative Party, and the representation of the Conservative Party's commitment to reflect modern 21st century Britain is right there in the faces of those cabinet ministers in the cabinet picture that one day I'm sure will be taken. I'm not sure they've been able to take a picture because of COVID. But anyway, when you look at the makeup of the cabinet, that itself is a testimony of what the Conservative Party's commitment is to BAME members of our society. But Scotland, this party in Scotland, we need to do some catch up here. And so it's very, very important that we as a party are making sure that the voices of those communities are well represented within our ranks, within the ranks of our candidates, and essentially, as you look at the Scottish Parliament today, which has very little representation from BAME communities, that Scottish Conservative members of the Scottish Parliament who have been voted in are from those communities. So as the Candidates Board Chairman, I am passionate about making sure that my party, the party I'm proud to belong to, is truly representative of modern Scotland. And to that end, I absolutely will do everything I can to promote the tremendously skilled and talented candidates we have already got on our approved lists from the BAME communities of Scotland. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'll let you off with that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for joining me for this podcast episode. I think we had a very insightful sort of discussion about some advice you have and just going through the process and sort of demystifying it. So thank you for taking time out
Excellent.
to discuss this.
It's been a pleasure to have this time to speak about these matters. I am passionate about the importance of developing the talent that's available to us as a party in Scotland, and to making sure that our party looks like the Scotland that we see around us. And I think all of Scotland's political parties can do better at doing that. And I aim to make sure, as the Candidates Board Chairman of the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, that we are absolutely at the forefront of making it happen.
I think that's a great message to end this discussion on. So thank you very much for joining me, and hopefully we'll speak soon.